Chapter 26. The top of the door was out of reach for someone of Carb's diminutive height. Even for Dickerson, sealing the top seals required him to maglock and climb in the ZG to reach it. He pulled the seal patching liquid from his belt and put the tip against the gap. The bottle, an applicator actually, measured the gap and released the correct amount of fluid as he traced the line. Each centimeter of movement resulted in a thick black substance caulking the gap. It took 2 minutes for him to finish the upper seal and then began on the sides until he met Carb's lines from the bottom. The sealant hardened instantly, creating a seal that could only be popped using a jack or a cutting beam. Or a can opener, he thought, and smiled. The smile quickly faded when he thought of the pinecone thing's single claw.
How we doing, big boy?
Carb asked. Almost done, little girl, she hissed into the mic.
If we ever get out of our suits again, I'm punching you right in the mouth.
You going to find a step stool first? Carb giggled.
Touche.
She said. There, Dickerson said as his last line met hers. That should do it. After placing the sealant back in his belt, Dickerson hand-walked down the door until his boots touched the floor. He examined the seals, making sure every gap was filled. Good work, he said, or at least good enough to seal that room off for a while.
Better hope it's longer than that.
Carb said.
How the hell do we know if that thing is going to come back to life?
I think it's safe to assume it's not a zombie, Dickerson said dryly.
Assume nothing.
Carb said.
Remember how we assumed this would be a milk run?
He didn't respond. There was absolutely nothing to say to that. When the command crew finally told them the real reason they'd flown all the way out to Pluto and the ship they were going to try and save, Dickerson had felt more than simple unease. He'd felt fear. And, if he was honest with himself, excitement as well. Let's get back to the corporal, he said.
Yeah.
Carb replied, as she mag-walked back to the medical bay's front entrance. He followed her, his rifle still held between his hands. They were safe here, at least that's what all three of them thought. But that didn't mean they actually were. For all he knew, a large school of those nightmarish things could be outside the pressure door even now. He shuddered at the thought. Dickerson stopped at the credenza, doing his best to ignore the remains behind them, and saw a hollow terminal. Hey, Carb, hold up.
What?
She asked, and turned around. He stepped behind the credenza, moved the chair and the corpse attached to it, and studied the terminal. It didn't look damaged, but he didn't see any indicator lights. Found a terminal, he said.
Oh, good. Is it live?
Don't know, he said. Pretty old model. Not even sure where the interface is.
Check the bottom of the desk. Maybe the switch is there?
Yeah, maybe. More and more automation and more control by the AIs and ships like Mira and even S&R Black made finding manual solutions a misery, and sometimes impossible. Atmo and Transorbital made automation a selling point of their ships. Transorbital liked to use the slogan, "Don't want to hire a crew? You don't have to," as if running a ship through the commercial shipping lanes, picking up and transporting mined or refined resources, was as easy as telling the AI where to go. Dickerson knew that was bullshit. What TO and Atmo didn't want their customers to know were the number of incidents that involved completely automated refineries and ships. Dozens, if not hundreds, of humans died every year because an AI either lost its shit or suffered a mechanical breakdown it couldn't fix. Humans were still a necessity. They always would be. He ran a glove beneath the desk and found a button. Here goes nothing, he said to himself, and pressed it. A recessed indicator light glowed green next to the terminal. A second later, the hollow display popped into existence. A transorbital logo appeared entwined with that of Atmo. Both were below the Sol Federation emblem. The animated logos froze and then a message appeared. Mira offline. No shit, he said aloud.
What?
Carb asked. He pointed at the display. Gave me the helpful message that Mira is offline.
Yeah.
Carb said.
Tell us something we don't already fucking know.
A series of menu options appeared. The one marked Ship Status glowed red. He selected it, and the display changed to show an outline of the ship itself. The aft section was completely crimson, while the midships was mostly yellow, with several portions marked in red as well. The foredecks were mostly green, with a few yellow and red spots. That was just the damage report. He selected environmental status, and the entire ship turned red, except, of course, for the medical bay. A new message appeared replacing the blinking Mira offline status. It read, Abandoned ship. Fuck you, he said to the hollow terminal. He flipped back to the ship's status and studied the timestamps. 41 years ago, on November 11th, Earth Standard Date, the Mira had suffered extreme damage. The aft portion of the ship, the damage to the midships, and the loss of atmosphere all happened on the same day and in the same hour. Well, that tells us something, he said.
What? What the hell are you talking about, Dickerson?
Mira, we know when she stopped and suffered damage,
And how does that help us?
Carb asked. He stood to his full height and glared at the hollow terminal. That we've been lied to, he said. He turned to face her. Mira stopped transmitting in June 43 years ago. At least that's what SF Gov claimed. That means the ship was still functional nearly 2 years after they said it had stopped transmitting.
Wait a minute.
You're saying Mira was still intact 2 years after they said it had gone dark? Exactly, Dickerson said. The trio and SF Gov must know that, unless Mira did stop transmitting. But I have a hard time believing that. The comms array was still functional at the time. Carb shook her head.
Why the hell would they lie about that?
Good question, Dickerson said. It's like asking why the real Mira is so different from the images in the history hollows. I don't know what it means, but it means something,
Well, that's perceptive.
she said.
Anything about communications? Are they still up and running?
He shook his head. According to this, the comms array hadn't yet been completely destroyed, damaged but not dead. However, the terminal doesn't have access to current information, only the readouts downloaded before Mira went to shit. My best guess is we'll need to make it to the bridge, which is another problem,
Why's that?
she asked. Because according to the terminal, the bridge suffered extensive damage the same day the ship lost atmosphere and the aft was damn near cut loose,
Great.
Karp said.
Fuck this. Let's find Elliot a suit and get the hell off this ancient tub.
Copy that, Dickerson said. He stared at the hollow display one last time, drinking in the information. His HUD recorded the displays, and he shunted the still images off to his block for later retrieval. Maybe Black would know what it all meant, assuming they ever communicated with the AI again. Dickerson reluctantly walked away from the display, sure he'd forgotten to get more useful data. He hadn't even bothered trying to connect his block to the hollow terminal. It was undoubtedly too old for that. He wondered how Kalimura had managed to connect to the shuttle. He followed Karb into the examination room where Kalimura stood watch over Elliot. The corporal's helmet was turned away from them and facing the auto dock. She appeared to be studying the display.
We got it sealed off, boss.
Karb said.
Good. Get back here.
Kalimura responded. Check your 6, Corporal, Dickerson said, purposefully elongating the last word with a Texas drawl. She stood straight and then turned.
Oh, right. Sorry. Should have checked my HUD. Boss?
Karb said.
Not my place to say it, but you need to be a little more aware of your surroundings.
Kalimura said nothing. She turned back to the auto dock. Dickerson and Karb waited patiently for her to say something or do something. After a moment, she finally straightened again.
I'm sending the locations to your blocks,
she said. A half-second later, his HUD lit up with a block message. The corporal had marked the emergency station on this deck, as well as the ones above. Dickerson studied the map. You expecting us to have to go up another deck? She shrugged.
I don't know what to expect, and neither do you.
Ah, Corporal, you've got that right,
So, boss, how do you want to do it?
Karb asked. Kalimura turned to them again. Instead of the barely confident voice she'd had since Karb called her out, she sounded calm, in control, and better yet, in command.
I'm staying here with Elliot. No offense, but I have more medical training than you two.
No shit, Dickerson said.
I want you,
she said, ignoring his remark,
to scout the locations. We need a suit. 2 if you can manage it. If you don't find one on this level, go up. And stay in communication. I want to know if you find something. I also want...
She paused.
We
she said, emphasizing the word.
Also need a way to communicate with Black. If you find any equipment that might help, I want that grabbed too. Hi, boss.
Carb said. Copy, Corporal. If it's out there, we'll find it, Dickerson said.
Good. As soon as you leave this room, I'll use my jack to seal it shut. Whatever you do, don't come back here and open the door without telling me. I need to make sure Elliot is safe first. Hi, boss.
Carb said. Let's go, Dickerson said. He turned to leave the room, Carb following him.
Good hunting, Marines, and be careful.
Kellymore said. Ah, Corporal, Dickerson said. He and Carb walked out of the room into the medical bay entrance. When they reached the door, Dickerson stood behind the manual controls. Ready when you are, Corporal,
Okay,
she said.
I'm putting the generator to sleep so we don't waste any power. Lights are going out in 3, 2...
The world's brightness disappeared. His HUD compensated at once to minimize the afterimage, but the glow was still on his retinas. Although he couldn't hear, he knew the room's atmospheric blowers had ceased. The O2, the heat, all of the changes the generator had made in the last 20 minutes would escape the moment they opened the door. Dickerson just hoped the autodock's pressure seals held.
Squad, you're clear to go,
Kellymore said. Ah, Corporal, turning on suit lights. He sent a command to his block, and the helmet and suit lights kicked on, bathing the door and the walls. Carb's own lights added to his a second later. Dickerson's finger hovered over the button. The door mechanism should have received enough power to work normally. He hoped. Opening door, he said over the squad comms, and pressed the button. The doors slid upward jerkily, as though the machinery was fighting through damage or something jamming the mechanism. Although he couldn't hear it, he knew air had rushed past his suit and out into the vacuum. The pair made their way through the open hatch, and Dickerson closed it behind them. Take point, Dickerson said. I'll cover.
Copy,
Carb said. She bent her knees and Mag walked down the right side. He stood tall as he walked down the left side of the corridor, his lights pointed ahead of Carb in an effort to illuminate any possible targets above her. A distance counter on his HUD slowly ticked down from 50 meters. Once they crossed the slip point they'd used to get to the medical bay deck, they were in unexplored territory. 25 meters of darkness lay before them. They hadn't gone 3 meters before Dickerson saw a shadow near the ceiling. Hold, he said. Carb immediately halted. He refocused his helmet light to narrow the beam and painted the target. The shadow, however, was too nested in darkness for him to make out its shape, but he did get an idea of its size. You see it?
Yes.
Carb said.
Is that a helmet?
I think so, he said, but I can't tell. I'm moving up.
Covering,
she said. After only a few long-legged steps, he was 2 meters ahead of Carb. The shape near the ceiling was, in fact, a helmet with an open faceplate. Unlike the SFMC helmets, the visor was transparent. Dickerson wished it wasn't. Carb, it's a helmet, and it ain't empty.
Shit,
Carb said.
Do I want to know?
No, he said. You really don't. I don't see anything else floating. Let's get moving.
Copy,
she said.
I'll cover.
Copy. Dickerson set his lights back to a broad field and continued down the deck. He wondered whose head had been in that helmet. Part of him knew he should pull it down and determine how the head had been decapitated to prepare themselves for a new threat. But he simply didn't have the energy. Bullshit, he said to himself. You're just tired of seeing dead folks who've been ripped apart for no goddamn good reason. Yeah, that. They continued forward in silence, each swinging their helmets slightly to make sure the entire corridor was lit as far as their lights could reach. Dickerson caught sight of ice chips floating near the ceiling, as well as the port side wall. He did his best to ignore the streaks of fluid sprayed across the metal corridor. Whatever had happened in the medical bay had continued on out here, unless the people in the med bay were hiding from it. Up ahead, the corridor ended in a pressure door. He walked to it and studied the surface. The metal was free of any stains and looked newer than the rest of the steel. I think this is an emergency station door, Carb grunted.
How you figure that out, genius? The fact the station is 1 meter behind the door?
Yeah, Dickerson said. He turned to stare at her. Isn't that how you figured it out? She knelt down and studied the seals.
Shit, This door doesn't have the standard seals. They must be embedded in the deck.
Wonderful, Dickerson said. Cut in?
Yeah,
Carb said.
I don't think a jack is going to work on this.
Copy that. Dickerson switched over to the squad channel. Corporal.
Mira here. Go.
Dickerson pushed on the door with his glove. Even with the suit's augmentation, it was like trying to move a mountain. We've reached the emergency station.
Copy. Have you seen anything else?
Ah, Corporal, just more of the same kind of shit we saw in the medical bay. There was a pause before Mira replied.
Copy. Boss, how's Elliot?
Carb asked.
I managed to repressurize the medical bay and we have atmosphere. So far, so good. Glad to hear it, boss.
Carb said.
Can you get the door open?
Don't think so, Dickerson said. The atmosphere wall is down. We're going to look around and then cut in if we can't find a manual release.
Copy. Let me know when you get in.
Ah, Corporal, Dickerson said. He cut the squad comms and switched back to private. Carb, you see anything? I mean, anything that looks like a panel?
No,
She said. She crawled along the starboard side wall, her magnetic glove sliding across the steel.
if there is one, it should be about waist high.
Following her example, he set his glove to near maximum and held it a quarter meter from the wall. The glove kept trying to pull him to the port corridor, but he was strong enough to keep it from affecting his balance. When he reached the door, he cut the magnetics again. No joy,
None here either.
Carp said. He turned. You want the honors? Carp giggled.
You should know by now I like cutting shit.
She reached into her belt and pulled out the portable cutting beam.
How thick you think this is?
Probably a quarter meter, Dickerson said. Should be pretty standard for emergency doors, even back then,
Guess we'll find out.
she said. A blue light licked out from the handheld cylinder. Carb moved to just above the door's bottom and slowly lifted the cutting beam. A second later, a strong gust of trapped air rushed past her.
Well, it had pressure.
Dickerson raised an eyebrow. How the hell is that possible?
Don't know.
She said, and continued lifting the beam. By the time she stood to her full height, a clean gap had appeared in the metal. She moved across until she created a meter-wide line and then knelt down again. When she reached the bottom of the door, she cut the beam's power and stood back up.
Big enough?
For short people, he said.
Asshole.
Carb said. He raised one of his boots, reversed the magnetic polarity, and kicked out against the three-sided panel. The metal panel fell through the door and into the darkness beyond. We're in, he said, putting his foot back on the deck. Now, let's see what we see.